Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of the Daily Run, and today we're playing as Eve. So today we're going to the Cathedral. Luckily no special daily shenanigans, and I would say the very first few floors were pretty standard. There was, I would say, some shenanigans going on later on, at least in terms of breaking with Twag, but besides that I would say that there wasn't anything too special about this run. It was just a very regular standard Eve daily that wasn't too strong but also wasn't very weak at all. Although I do expect a lot of people would have struggled with this one, and I would maybe like to explore some of those opportunities, or maybe where things could have potentially went wrong if you maybe made some of the different decisions. The very first two floors I would say are pretty standard, because I don't think there's a way really to get bombs or keys unless you spend the time, of course, playing the fortune teller or just trying to get them in the arcade. This is something I didn't really think of as I was actually going through the daily, mainly because of course you're trying to go fast, so you don't really have like 2 minutes to spare in order to get some of those consumables in order to get to the treasure room. But looking back on it, it would have definitely been a good idea just to spend some money, not much, like 5 cents, and try to maybe get a little bit lucky. It would have definitely improved the chances of us actually getting something good, and especially because there is a treasure room on this floor, we also need a key on the next floor, right? So it would be like a double whammy. At least we would be increasing our chances of actually being able to access at least one of those rooms. And you never know, maybe that particular room actually had something that would have been very useful, and I think it's worth checking out. It's definitely worth, I would say, losing, quotes in quotes, a minute, maybe even a little bit less than that, to try to get some of those consumables, which can really change the tide of the run as a whole. But of course I didn't do that, so I just didn't have any keys or bombs up until this point. But luckily the third floor was nice enough to provide us with some of those consumables we so desperately needed. I was still afraid that maybe there weren't gonna be any keys which showed up, but luckily, because of contract from below, as soon as we get one key, we get another one as well, and then of course we can go to the shop, as well as the actual treasure room. And once we're at the shop, because we have enough money, then of course we can afford more consumables, and things kinda spiral out of control from there. So really, when you kinda think about it, you only need one key, or maybe two in the most case, to start being good in that consumable economy, if that makes any sense. So you're actually have enough to be sustainable by just going to the shops on the next floors. But of course, as the run was going on, you might notice that the run that definitely kind of took off at a certain point, and I definitely think not a lot of people would find the items I found, simply because there was a joker card there, and of course if you do reroll for like long enough, you're gonna get a blank card. But the problem was, right, if you spend your money on the card or the blank card, then you're not gonna have enough money for one or the other, right? You can get the joker card, or you can get the blank card, and of course there's always a possibility that maybe you just didn't get enough coins or pennies on the previous floors in order to really afford both. And having both is kind of the key here, because that does allow you to go basically to every single devil deal, and some of these devil deals have some of those really good items which help you clear rooms very effectively. But the reason why I did it, or at least why I was able to have enough money, is because I spent a lot of time previously trying to destroy the poops and the fires, which is something I usually do. Sometimes I maybe avoid it if I feel like maybe I have enough money. But I felt like, because I had no consumables, it would be a good idea to maybe spend just a little bit more time doing that, because you never know, it might make a difference in the future. And I think in this particular instance it did make a difference, and I was able to afford both. And then of course I could have used the blank card alongside with the joker card to get to some of those devil deals. And I got some of the items like Little Brimstone, which is obviously great, later on Succubus, which is also pretty great. And I'm not sure if I would have gotten these items otherwise. Obviously there's always a chance of them just spawning naturally. So I'm not sure maybe if that's I would say the defining difference between someone who went this path and someone who didn't, and maybe if that's a large enough difference to really make an impact on the run. But for now, it definitely feels good just to be in a position where I'm doing just a little bit more damage, and I'm feeling pretty comfortable with maybe where my run is taking me. And of course, there's always that question: should I even do boss rush at this point? I don't have enough health, I don't have a lot of health, and the items I have, I would say, are really much more suited for clearing rooms. Depression is one of those items which works well if you're against just regular enemies. Little Brimstone as well, because of its AoE properties. It still does quite enough damage even against bosses. But the problem is a lot of the bosses in Boss Rush either have a lot of HP or have a lot of invisibility frames, so really kind of getting a good aim on those can be a bit difficult. But I still try to persevere. I felt like I was going to be in a good position to get there, and I hope maybe that with a combination of every single damage source I have, alongside with maybe like Dead Bird and a Little Brimstone and Depression and things like that, I would be able to be strong enough to get through it in a reasonable amount of time. And luckily I was able to get through it. I think I finished it like 26 minutes. I didn't show it because Boss Rush can be a bit tedious sometimes, and it's not like anything really changes, and at the end I didn't really even pick up any items, because I think the item that I got as a result was Brother Bobby. But yeah, you know, so we're going kind of to the first womb floor and the second womb floor here, and we got to the point where I think I made the right decision, right? Sometimes it can be a bit dangerous to enter boss rush when you're feeling weak enough, because obviously then you can miss Hush. But in this case, because I knew my room clear was very good, especially because I picked up Toxic Shock as one of my first items when I entered boss rush, I know that I can just go get through it and use Toxic Shock to just basically go through the runes very easily. Of course, combine that with the Succubus and some of the other things I have, and I feel like my room clear is pretty decent, because I'm also at a very good high speed because of Roid Rage, and of course because we're in the Horror Babylon state, we can also afford to go through these rooms pretty quickly. So I felt like even if maybe it takes me 6 to 7 minutes to finish boss rush, I have enough to just rush to Hush and get to the Void. And of course that is really what the key difference is here. We're trying to get to the Void. The Hush is maybe not as important, but obviously it'll still give you 5,000 points. I wouldn't call him unimportant, but getting to the Void really is the key here, because not only will that floor allow us to get more consumables, because we have Sackboy or Sackhead, it will allow us to get more battery charges, and of course we can use that in combination with maybe some of the cards we find. Ideally, of course, you would hope for a Yara rune and just break that way, but I think I get a Justice card, which I would say is pretty decent as well, because that means I can just maybe get a little bit more consumables, and I think I use it like 40 times in total, which is obviously not a negligible amount of points. So it's definitely something that improved our overall score, and this is something that I don't think would be achievable if we went to the Cathedral. Of course, there was always the possibility of there being a sacrifice room, and maybe it would be worth for that if unlike something like the Wafer or maybe the Cancer, which would reduce our damage, or the damage taken to be more precise. But you know, I definitely think going to the Void here was the right choice in order to really try to maximize our score. And maybe what I think is funny about this run is that there really weren't a lot of damage upgrades, and I think this run only really worked because we're Eve, and Eve is so strong, especially when you get into that, I would say, minutia of just having enough health and having enough damage that you're able to sustain yourself with the Razor Blade. You can really go through this without much worry, right? And you can just pretty much kill some of those early little floors without getting any damage upgrades. Luckily, later on enough, because of Little Brimstone and Succubus, we even got some of those damage upgrades, which I would say didn't really make a difference, but it definitely helped, because it scales with our Succubus, it scales with our Toxic Shock, and all of that does allow us to be a lot more effective where we're just going to room, even if maybe our stats aren't looking all that good. You might say, well, 9 damage is pretty decent, and you wouldn't be wrong, right? But going into some of those later stages, a 9 damage at 10 Dare Delay is just really not enough in order to get to it. You really need a little bit more to just be so effective. Or I would say, you know, you can definitely beat the game with these stats, but it's not ideal, right? It's still a very high possibility that you would just get hit because of any unknown reason. Maybe something teleports into you, or maybe spawns on top of you, or whatever. And having high damage definitely does allow you to tackle some of those rooms much more efficiently. But you know what I'm saying, right? You know, even though maybe our stats aren't all that good because of the items that we've gotten, we're in a pretty good position, so I can't be complaining too much. But of course, as I said before, you can see how this run really could go wrong. If you maybe didn't go via the Devil Deal route, maybe if you didn't find that Joker card, some things could be very different. And I think it also does depending on which Devil Deals you actually visited, the items that you get in boss rush, and of course as a reward, are gonna be different. And that's something that's, I would say, an unspoken rule, like a quirk of the system in some sense, that definitely makes it a little bit more unfair, and especially in a run like this one, where one item can be the difference between if a run is gonna be strong or not. But you know, it's still, this is Isaac, you know, this is pretty much what we have to expect. So we get to the end, I walk into the fight and I see it's a Satan fight, and I really feel like doing it, so I just quit here, and I feel like that's gonna be a good end, the good way to end the episode. So we're at 44,000 points at 3,500 damage penalty, which is admittedly not that much. I expected I got hit a little bit more, and I think my end ranking was 5th on the Gridbot leaderboards, which is actually really decent. I suspected I would be much lower, just because, you know, there was that blank card, and I would expect a lot of people would find a Yara rune or something like that, but apparently that didn't really happen, so that's definitely something I would consider to be a bit of a lucky break for us. But you know, I think we played decently. We didn't have too many items, we went through it, we didn't take too much damage, and all of that just kinda, I think, added in together for a very enjoyable run. And with that said, I hope you enjoyed it as well, and I hope to see you next time.